Welcome back to Grace Bible College Graduate Studies. New class beginning today, Min 540, Ministry and Culture. I want to welcome you. My name is Dr. Matt Lovren, and I'll be your guide, your facilitator, your professor through this class, where we talk about all things related to ministry and culture. I wanted to go over just a broad overview of the class so you have an idea of what to expect as you're looking through your syllabus materials and looking through the various assignments of the course on Blackboard. This is a course that's really designed to help you connect with the popular culture, with American culture, with Western culture as it's out there. You could think of culture more broadly in terms of engaging other diverse cultures, multi-ethnic cultures, multiculturalism, or even contextualization in third cultures like overseas missions or something like that. But for the purposes of this course, we're really talking about engaging the culture at large, Western American culture. And for those purposes, we're going to look at a lot of theory, but hopefully also it won't be too heavy or too long on theory. You'll also have plenty of opportunities to make that investigation very practical for your ministry, whatever that might look like. So as far as a broad overview of the course goes, we are going to spend 6 weeks together, as is our custom. Week 1, we will look at some theories and models of culture. And to do that, we're going to look at the work of H. Richard Niebuhr in particular. H. Richard Niebuhr was an American theologian and ethicist writing in the 1950s and 1960s, whose work, in particular his famous book, Christ and Culture, continues to bear a lot of fruit in Christian thinking, particularly evangelical thinking, about how Christians engage the surrounding culture. And how do they do that from a biblical worldview, and how do they do that while remaining true and faithful to the gospel and to the scriptures? So that'll be week 1, and we'll do a lot of digging deep into some theories and models for culture as we think about that. In the second week of the course, in module number 2, we're going to rethink that engagement. So if H. Richard Niebuhr were to present us with a received model, the way that Christians, evangelicals, the type of people who would come to Bible college, the way that we normally think about engaging the surrounding culture, we're going to look at some critique of that, and we're going to look at that critique from a variety of standpoints. I'll say a little bit more about our authors and the text that we'll use, but this will be mainly where our authors for the course and the books that we're reading help to inform our engagement with the surrounding culture. Our third module of the class, based on rethinking that engagement that we did in week 2, our third module will look at some alternative models of cultural engagement. In particular, we're going to look at emerging church, missional church, and some various ways of approaching the surrounding culture that are not on the spectrum of what evangelicals normally think about. We might look at monasticism, for example, as a way of removing ourselves from the culture. You might look at the Amish tradition as a way of removing oneself from the culture, and at the same time trying to be as faithful as possible to the scriptures and to the gospel. So alternative models of engagement, that will be week 3. Once we have done all of that work and looking at different models for engagement, thinking about the positives and negatives and the pros and cons of different models and their usefulness and also their faithfulness to what we believe is a biblical view, what you personally believe is most faithful to the gospel. We're not going to define that for you. I'm not going to define that for you as the professor, but rather in investigating your calling and furthering your ministry, hopefully you're able to sort through these various models. You're able to look at these different examples of cultural engagement, and if it's like a buffet, you're able to select the pieces that you believe fit your ministry the best, fit your personality and temperament, and the dynamics of what you do in your calling, but also, and most importantly, are going to be faithful to your sense of the gospel and to your faithfulness to the Word of God. So we'll always keep those commitments front and center as we look at these different aspects of cultural engagement. So all that being said, we get into the second half of the course, and we will look at some various practices of cultural engagement. That is to say, what are the things specifically that Christians need to do to put into practice in order to engage the culture in a way that reaches people with the gospel, that doesn't compromise Christian faith or orthodoxy. That would be a discussion that comes up in the course of our study. How do we practice the Christian faith in such a way as to remain faithful to the gospel, to engage the culture around us, to hand on the faith to future generations, to our children and to our grandchildren? What kinds of practices do we need to put in place? And that'll be the subject of Module 4. In Module 5, we will look at the question of engaging cultural texts. And by cultural texts, we're going to let one of our authors, Kevin Van Hooser, define for us what a cultural text is and how do we look at what the culture produces in terms of art and artifact, all of the things that culture makes, from movies to music to magazines to politics and education to art to garden to landscaping to the homes we live in to the roads that we build to the food that we eat. All of these things can come under the broad umbrella of a cultural text. And we'll be talking about how does the Christian who's faithful, who's biblically informed, who's thoughtful about trying to engage with the surrounding culture, how do we look at all of the things that our culture produces and evaluate them and analyze them and use them for the sake of the gospel? So that will be the subject of Module 5. In Module 6, the last thing that we'll do is have you some time for constructing your own philosophy of cultural engagement. So it'll be a little bit like the paper that you wrote for Min 530, Transformational Leadership. But more importantly, the last assignment for this course, the big paper at the end, has to do with a revision of a paper that you wrote back in the program seminar. If you think back to Min 501, that program seminar paper had at the end of it a philosophy of cultural engagement. That's one of the main things that we want you to be able to do as graduates of the Master of Arts in Ministry, is to have this biblical worldview, but to look at the surrounding culture and to be able to evaluate what's going on in the surrounding culture, and then really be able to build bridges and make connections with the surrounding culture and relate to people who move and interact with that culture on a daily basis. And for most of us, this is our congregations. These are the people that we meet each day. They're the people that you interact with in your neighborhood and when you go to the store and at your various jobs. How do we engage these people, culturally speaking, with the gospel of Jesus Christ and with the truth of the Word of God? So you will be revising that paper that you wrote back in Min 501. So it might be a good idea, even at the beginning of this class, to go back and take a look at that paper and see, what did I write 3 months ago? How does it apply? How does this class change some of the things that I was thinking back then? And revisit that paper and use that as a springboard for the last assignment. I want to say a little bit about our texts for the class and just give you a brief introduction to those. First text is called To Change the World by James Davidson Hunter. I'm not sure if that's reversed for you. It's not reversed. Perfect. To Change the World by James Davidson Hunter, who is a sociologist at the University of Virginia, and he's a Christian author. James Davidson Hunter is famous for the phrase culture war. If you've heard the phrase culture war, he was the originator of that phrase in the early 1990s when the culture wars were just identified, because he wrote the book on culture wars, literally. So you can actually go and check that out, some of Hunter's earlier work. But the premise of his book, To Change the World, is the idea that Christians believe, and have always believed, that it is somehow a part of their mission as followers of Jesus Christ to effect a positive change on the world. And so what Hunter does is he looks at several different ways within American Christianity that Christians have tried to change the world. In particular, he looks at Christianity on the left, he looks at Christianity on the right, or conservative evangelical Christianity, and progressive Christianity on the left. And in the middle, I guess you would say, it's not really a middle, but it's a third option, he looks at the Mennonite churches, or the peace churches, as a way of being engaged with the culture. And it's interesting that he says, although all three of these versions of Christianity believe that it's their mission to change the world, none of that change actually ever seems to happen. And so Hunter is pursuing the question of, for all that Christians want to change the world, whether it's through politics or through social action, why does it seem to be the case that nothing ever changes for the better in the culture? So you can look at Roe v. Wade and 1.3 million abortions a year for the last 30 or 40 years. You can look at the pro-life movement. You can also look at the more recent marriage debates about homosexual marriage. Why does it seem to be the case that Christianity can't get traction on the culture to change the culture for the better? All right, that's one of the things that Hunter is going to talk about. Secondly, James K.A. Smith, Desiring the Kingdom. James K.A. Smith is a teacher of philosophy, theology, and worship at Calvin College, just down the street from Grace Bible College. And he wants to talk about the way that not only we're changing the culture, but how does the culture shape and form us? So if you're reading his book and it seems a little upside down, what culture does, Smith says, is shape us from the outside in. In other words, he's going to be critical of the idea that worldview and our ideas result in life change that we work out. Isn't that always what you believe the right things, have the right thinking, have the right orthodoxy, and orthopraxy will follow? What Smith wants to do is turn that on its head and say what we need is right praxis, we need right action, and then we will start thinking correctly as Christians. All right, so I hope that follows. He's going to invert that paradigm of biblical worldview and then right action. He's going to say it's not so much the intellectual background that makes us Christian, it's what we do and what we practice as Christians that make us Christian. Our third text, which should be a lot of fun, is Kevin Van Hooser and several other editors, Everyday Theology, How to Read Cultural Texts and Interpret Trends. So this will be a great book for you to look at some different films, some different pieces of music, some different cultural forms, cultural products that Christians interact with and use and talk about on a regular basis, and sometimes, most times, often without thinking about what's at stake in these different cultural artifacts. How can I interpret them? How can I evaluate them? And hopefully this will be very productive, not just for you personally as a student, but for the people you serve and minister to. So that's where we're going. Hopefully the course is not too long on theory. Hopefully you find it very practical, but let me know if there's anything I can do to be of assistance to you as you begin week 1. See you next time.